Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. I really do, because anytime you can share your journey with someone, and especially this kind of a journey, and you can share it, and then hopefully you will share it with others, really is a privilege. So first, I'd like to tell you how this book got its title. Because I always look at a book and I go, well, how did they get that title? Where does that come from? And as you shared, I work for an online university. And believe it or not, before there was online, we had distance education. So a lot of your universities that are online were really distance first. Today we call that hybrid because of the cars. But that's what it is. You used to come together and then you worked online. And this has been a very long time. So I worked at an online university, and which was based in Cincinnati, Ohio. So we all had to come in about 4 times a year to Cincinnati from all over the United States. So there were several hundred of us. And we gathered, and of course they paid for your flights, and they paid for your hotel room, and they paid for you, so you were going to work. It was not fun. So we came for a week from all over. And when we gathered, we worked from about 7:30 in the morning till dinner time. At dinner time, they had us, if you were like me, you'd go up to your room and you were spent and you'd get the clicker and watch TV, you were exhausted. But you could also meet with people you had worked with over the year who lived in other places, or maybe had buddies that you wanted to be with. So I had this experience after my husband passed away. About 6 months later, because we came about every 3-ish months. About 6 months later, one of the gentlemen with whom I work called me up because he said, Arlene, I know you've really been through this difficult time, and I would like to have dinner with you one evening. Now, this is a very spiritual man, very kind man, highly intellectual man, was really a helper. And so I said, great. One night I could go out to dinner. So we go out to dinner. And this is about 6 months after my husband died. And by the way, he had a girlfriend. He was in a committed relationship. So I didn't have to worry about that. That's always on one's mind. So we did that at the 6th month. And then every 3 months when I came in, we would have a meal together. And it's wonderful meal. I say that for a reason. So about a year and a half later, when he called me to make arrangements which night in the week would be good, he said, I really want to discuss 2 things with you. And I said, okay, I appreciate it. Fine. We picked on it. We go to have dinner. And he said, remember, there's 2 things I want to discuss with you. Okay. So he eats quite similarly to me. We eat a lot of fish, we eat a lot of chicken, but since we both eat meat, which not everybody does anymore, we would always share. We'd share a piece of meat. And there's a reason I'm telling you this. So we ordered our appetizer, we ordered salad, we ordered the steak, and then we ordered dessert. And we share everything so you can have the whole cast of dinner as opposed to just ordering a big plate of food where you get full. So we get to the appetizer, and he said, I would like to discuss with you 2 things. I said, okay, I'm having my appetizer, happy as I can be. And he said, I really want to talk to you because I think it's time maybe for you to move on. Then he said, and also think about your house. Now, people come with a very good heart, and they are saying something to help you. But telling someone who's a widow, and I cannot speak for a widower because I'm not a male, but as a widow, I can tell you, these are the 2 things you don't want to hear. You're not silly. You'll know if it's time to move on, and you'll know if it's time to move out of your house. So I looked at him, and for those of you who remember the movie The Exorcist with Linda Blair, when a head goes spinning, when someone says to you, you should move on or sell your house, you want to take their head and spin it like that. You're just crazy. So never say that. And it comes with great intentions. So he says that, I may want to move on and I may want to sell my house. And I say thank you because I'm being taken to dinner. I want to be polite. And then they take away the appetizer and they bring the salad. Share the salad, it's very nice. Second thing, says the second time, I want to talk to you about moving on, selling. Okay, just be quiet, Arlene, and say thank you. Because you really want to just lose your mind. So he says, I say thank you, and then they bring the steak. And he cuts the steak, and we share the steak. Now, I'm like baseball, 3 strikes and you're out. Did it once, did it twice. Now he does it a third time. Now, when you go to a really good restaurant, which this is a French bistro, I love bistros, and it's lovely. The music is playing in the background, the tablecloths are out, and it's real casual. But if you order steak, whether you're in a good steakhouse or just a nice restaurant, they give you these knives that have a wooden handle, the thick wooden handle, and the knife is serrated. So now he tells me a third time. Now you have to realize, for somebody to say to me, I should move on, it indicates that I have to leave my husband somewhere and move on without him. Well, that was not about to happen. As a matter of fact, I don't think it's ever going to happen. So in any case, I'm listening, and he goes through the whole spiel and why I should move on and how I should move on. And I don't know what happened, but I picked up the wooden handle. And I said, this is the third time you said that to me. Let me explain what's about to happen. If you say it to me one more time, I am going to lunge across the table and catch you with it. And he just looked at me. And if you know how long 45 seconds or a minute can be, that is a very long time of dead silence with somebody holding a knife with a serrated edge. So he looked at me and he said, didn't say anything. And then after a minute, he said, well, Arlene, it's possible you may never be able to move on, but I'll bet you can move forward. And so the next thing I'd like to talk to you about is what it's actually like to go through this experience. The best way I can describe the process of moving forward after losing someone so close to you is by comparing the process to a train ride. When you envision a train, you can picture a long line of separate compartments. Life moves forward from the last compartment to the first. As you progress in life, you slowly move from one car to the next, eventually shutting the door to the previous compartment and becoming content in the next one, until it's time to move forward again. That moving forward, letting go of one door and stretching for the next one, shakes every part of you. And basically, if you've ever done something like that, going from one compartment of a train, you have to shut the door till the next one, there's a platform. And that platform is shaking. And you are going, and that's what every one of these experiences are like for people going through this. And sometimes you may feel you've moved from one compartment to another without even having been aware that the movement occurred. Mostly you're trembling across the unknown. When I lost the love of my life, I was keenly aware of every single moment, often as if I were in slow motion. I chose to open the door and reach for the next compartment, still seeing the compartments behind me, but moving forward to the next one on my own. I find comfort in knowing I can always look back to see and remember everything inside of each compartment, while I also know there is much to do in the one I'm in now. So that's sort of what it's like. And I wrote every word of this book, but I firmly believe this book had a life of its own. And I'll share why. The first time I had to go to Cincinnati after Howard died was 3 months later. And the president of the college, Roger Sublette, who's a lovely man, called me at home before I got to Cincinnati and said, Arlene, his wife Cindy and I, Roger, would love to take you for brunch. And I said, he's the president, so of course I'm going to say yes. I said, oh, thank you so much. So he picks me up with his wife, and we go to brunch, and we chit-chatted, because they knew my husband. And when we leave brunch, on the way from brunch to where he was dropping me off, I was telling him things my husband did those last 9 months when he was sick. And when we got to where I was exiting, he said, you know, Arlene, I think you should bullet point. He said, just jot down, you don't have to write a sentence, you don't have to write anything. This is 3 months after. And just jot down, because you won't remember all these things that Howard did for you. He said, it's just the way it's going to happen. So I get home, and I said, all right. So I took a yellow piece of paper, and I jotted down stuff. I didn't pick this paper up for 5 years. But I took the paper, I put it at the top of my desk, and I left it there, because he told me to do that. Okay. Well, I'm very fortunate that people are very kind and very helpful to me. And so there were 3 women, and it happened after the 3rd year that Howard died. There were 3 women, and they did not know each other. They actually lived in different states. And they each said to me, Arlene, you should write a book about your process. And I said, what process? I didn't have a process. What are you talking about? And they said, you should write a book about your process that other women can profit from. And I said, I still don't understand. They said, you had a yearly process. And I said, okay. And so each one asked me, not having spoken to the other, completely independent, each one said, well, what did you do the first year? And I said, the first year I had to repair stuff because I needed a new roof, but my husband was bedridden for 9 months. So I couldn't put on a new roof, even though water was dripping and I had lots of buckets. So because he was sick, and you can't have people banging on the roof, putting on a new roof while somebody's in bed. The other thing I needed to do was the house had to be tented. Well, those of you who live in Florida, which we do, understand that when a house gets tented, they're pumping poison through it. So I couldn't move him, so the house had to be tented. And then there were lights outside that were broken, things like that. So the first year, that's what I did. They said, uh-huh. They said, and what'd you do the second year? And I said, everything that has to do with paper. In other words, I had to do a will, I had to put the house in my name, I had to go to banks and change the bank accounts and all the things that had to do with paper. But the beauty in giving myself a year, which I didn't realize, was that you think you're going to do something in the next 2 months, and then you don't do it in the fall. So you go, okay, well, maybe I'll get it done in the winter. And you don't get it done in the winter. Then you go, maybe I'll do it. But usually, if you give yourself a year, and you give yourself permission that everything can take a year, you get it done. And then they said, and what'd you do in the 3rd year? I said, well, in the 3rd year, I went upstairs because I had moved, as many of us did, from colder climates, and I had big old wood furniture. So I got rid of that, everything on the 3rd year. And then the crux was when these 3 women all said, so what's on for the 4th year, Arlene? And I said, actually, I'm doing the outside. I've got dead trees. I've got limbs that are down. So yeah, they said, you have a process, so you should write it. I said, okay. I still was not writing anything. So I dye my hair. And when you dye your hair, you're sitting with dye on your head for 32 minutes. If anybody here, and I know no one else does, dyes their hair, you sit for 32 minutes. And then what do? You talk to your hairdresser, if they pay attention to you. And so my hairdresser knew all this was going on, and he said, these women are right. Said it in the 4th year. He said, these women are right. You should write this up. And I said, oh, yeah, right, that's going to happen. And then the next time I came in, he said, I thought about this, and I have 2 women with whom you should speak. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, they're your age-ish. One had been married 25 years. One had been married a long time, like I was. And he said, you should talk to them. And I said, Guy, okay, just as in Guy, it's in the book. I said, Guy, let me ask you a question. How can I go around calling people up and say, you're a widow, I'm a widow, which is like saying you have a dead husband and I have a dead husband, so we should talk. they're going to think I'm insane. He said, well, I'll call them and I'll see, or email them, and I'll see if they want to talk to you. And I said, okay, which he did, and they did. And so I met with both of them, and they sort of lived in my community, one close, one far. But I did meet them, we had lunch, and I said, well, do you mind if I take some notes? So I was taking notes as I spoke to them. I worked in a university, you never go anywhere without taking notes. It's like, attached to you. So for those of us who remember notes and not number. So in any case, he did, they wanted to. And one was Christian and one was Jewish. And there's a reason I'm telling you this. So I met with them, each of them 4 times. It was lovely. And then what happened was, I have a friend who's Hispanic. And she called me up because I had told her I was interviewing these 2 women. And she said, Arlene, you live in Miami. You should interview a widow who's Hispanic. I went, okay. I said the same thing. I can't call them, but if you want to call your friend and then they'll speak with me, I'd be glad to. And that's how that happened. And then another friend of mine is from India. And she said, you don't have a widow from India. I said, am I supposed to have a widow from, But in any case, she called it her cousin. And the cousin wanted to be interviewed. And that's really when I went to Verizon the next day and got my plan upgraded because I realized what was about to happen. And then I traveled to Portugal with friends from Portugal with whom I felt very safe. And we were just sitting one morning and I was telling them this whole business. And she goes, my cousin, who's Portuguese, lives in France and you should talk to her. Said the same thing. And I have a friend who's gay. And my friend who's gay said to me, well, Arlene, we have spouses and our spouses die and we're widows. You should talk to a gay one. I said, okay. So all these people brought me people. I didn't do any of this. And there were 13 of them who really represent total diversity, whether it's countries, whether it's cultures. So it was really quite an interesting experience. That's why I say this book really does have a life of its own. What I'd like to share with you, though, when you also are by yourself, because I have sort of, and this is not, it might be in the book, I don't remember, but I have definitions. There are people who, once they become a widow, they're lonely. And that's quite normal. You've been with somebody and you're lonely, which I am never. And there are people who go, I'm alone. Well, I never feel I'm alone, because remember, I didn't leave that guy in the back. He comes along with me at all times. But I recognize that I am by myself. And when one is by yourself, you have to make choices. And I made 3 choices immediately. And I don't know why or how, but I did. I just made these choices. And one was wearing black, one was not listening to music, and one was no dancing. Just made that up in my head. But they were great choices, and I'll tell you why. Wearing black is a traditional expression of mourning in many cultures, including our own, though American widows today tend not to adhere to such rigorous customs. I decided this discipline suited me and immediately moved the rest of my clothes out of my closet, anything that was a color. For 1 year, I'd focus my energies on getting through each day and maintaining my emotional stability, not on what I'd be wearing. What I soon discovered was that this choice not only freed me from issues of fashion, appearance, impressions, it also set me on a path of simplicity. It became easier to move through the day, and at the day's end, drop my black simple clothes into the laundry basket, take a hot shower, and climb into bed. When the next day arrived, simplicity prevailed once more. Year 1 went by in this fashion, or lack of it. No music. Whatever era we come of age in my case it was the 60s, we all remember beloved music and lyrics of the day. What's more, throughout the course of a long relationship, certain songs accrue special meaning. Music has a way of evoking memories, moments, and firsts, as nothing else can, and producing what's known as a frisson, Frisson is a French word. It's really a kind of shiver occurring like an electric current. I knew that getting through all the milestones of year one, birthdays, anniversaries, and such, would be difficult. I decided it might be easier to weather those occasions without the additional associations and feelings called up by the music that had become meaningful to Howard and me. One of the songs was Yes, I'm Ready by Barbara Mason. Another was My Cup Runneth Over by Ed Ames. Add to those the romantic strains of Johnny Mathis, Roberta Flack, and the rest of the romantic slow dance music of those years. Operatic arias, Broadway show tunes, even Hallmark commercial jingles could set off a flood of feelings in me. So I made a conscious effort to avoid this stimulus during year one, knowing that eventually these songs would provide comfort rather than sheer pain. No dancing. Remembering that shared feeling, the closeness, the touch, can be overwhelming. I often describe life with Howard as a dance. So when that dance ended, it made sense for me to take a break from literal dancing. Again, this left me more able to focus on what I needed to accomplish. It also offered me an excuse for declining invitations to parties and gatherings, which spared me the experience of sitting at a table while the music and other couples spun around me. Not attending parties that first year was a beneficial result of my moratorium on music and dancing. My choices fit together, and they fit me. Following choices, there were firsts, things that you do for the first time that are frightening. So I made my choices, and now I made choices to do first. And the first thing I decided to do was to have two couples for dinner, but not together. I had to practice. So I had very good friends. One was a couple named Gail and Jim, and I'd been friends with them for like 40 years. And we had gone to dinner, and we had eaten each other's houses, we'd eaten. And so I called them, and I said, I'd like to have a practice dinner. Remember, it's a practice dinner. And I want to try and practice on you. And then I called another couple, my friends Luis and Anna, who are the couple from Portugal, and I felt very safe with them too. So I said, I'd like you to come to dinner for a practice dinner. So the first dinner, Gail and Jim come, and I planned this very carefully. Now I have a wood table that's maybe 3 feet from the sink. So I said, we're going to eat there. It's very cash. So I set the table. You know how I am about silverware now. I set the table, I put out French bread, I put out the salad, and I had a meal, shrimp and rice. And I was making the same exact meal for the other couple. So we sit down, we cut some bread, we have the salad, and then we go to clear the salad plates. So, because I'm sitting here and Gail and Jim are across from me. So I said, okay, I'm going to bring the salad plates to the sink. And Gail said, well, I'll bring these 2 plates to the sink, our plates, I'll meet you at the sink. I said, okay. So it's not a big deal. I picked up my silverware, I picked up my plate, I put it in the sink, and then Gail comes with her plate, it's hers and Jim. And I said, how am I doing, Gaily? How am I doing? And she said, Arlene, you're doing great. Now it would be good if you gave us back our silverware. I said, what are you talking about? She said, well, when you took your silverware, you took all the silverware from the table. The silverware for the salad, the silverware for the meal, the silverware for dessert. You took everything away from us. Silverware. So I said, okay, but she went and got forks and knives, and it was fine, and she had brought dessert, and I always feel the last thing you remember is dessert, so, you know. But I knew I had failed my practice dinner. Okay. 2 weeks later, I have Anna and Luis. Same French bread, same salad, same shrimp, same rice. And we have our salad, and I go to pick up my plate, and Anna says, oh, let me pick up those 2 plates, our plates, and I'll bring it to the sink. I'm not touching the silverware. I don't care if it's dirty the whole time. I'm just bringing the plates. So Anna gets up, we bring the plates, put it in the sink, and she is with me. I said, you know what, Anna, let's just plate the food here. Get the dinner plates and we'll just plate it here rather than have to bring things over the table and back. It's a practice dinner. I figured I was a success because I let everybody have their silverware. And so we get up, we put the plate in, and then we go to the shrimp. That came first, and shrimps in some butter sauce, it's fine. And then we go over the rice. Now, I make my rice in a rice cooker, which means it cooks an hour or 2 hours. It's different rice. And I hit the button so that the rice cooker can open up. And there, if you know anything about baseball or hardball, is a ball of rice that's completely hard. You could take a hammer. You could take that rice is a ball. Well, of course, I had forgotten to add broth or water or whatever one wants to add. And so Anna very carefully, just like Gail was perfect, Anna was perfect. She said, you know, Arlene, you have plenty of French bread, so we'll just use the French bread, put it back out, and we'll dip it in the butter and the shrimp. It'll be fine. And she does make a great chocolate mousse, so dessert was delicious. And so I basically failed my 2 firsts. However, about 6 months or 8 months later, I had them come back and separately again. But I said, this will be a regular dinner, a real dinner. So it was, and everything went fine. Still simple. So that was my first guest for dinner. The other first I did was really very unusual. And I'm going to read you this little section. 3 years after Howard died, my friend Bud was planning a trip to Barcelona with a couple and invited me to join them. I said I'd think about it, hung up the phone, looked in the mirror and said, I don't think so. They were leaving in 2 weeks. How could I possibly go or even consider it? So the next morning, when I mentioned the invitation to my daughter, she didn't hesitate. She said, just go. Get on that plane and go. You can afford a ticket. Bud will take care of you, and you might even have a good time. And if you don't, or you get scared, you can always get on a plane and come home. I had never even met this other couple. But I trusted Bud, and as you learn if you read my book, trust is the basis of everything. After a bit more thought, I embraced the idea and said yes. As it worked out, I had to travel to Spain and back alone. I found my way to the hotel without incident and was welcomed by warm and wonderful people. What I'd never expected, and I mean never, was that I'd experience a major first on Sunday, December 18th, 2016, having survived walking with my old friend and my new ones through a torrential rainstorm. Now, we live in Miami. We know what torrential rainstorms are. That's like what precedes the hurricane. And we just were, where your clothes stick to you. My shoes fell apart while I was walking. It was a mess. But we walked through a torrential rainstorm to a restaurant called Seven Portes, and we took a look at our bedraggled, soggy selves and started laughing. My companions laughed, and I laughed right along with them. This was one of those exuberant, overpowering belly laughs, the kind I had not experienced in 3 years. We dried off as best we could, sat in the restaurant, and ordered food, laughing all the while. I continued to laugh with the others until happy tears started coming down my cheeks, and my head nearly hit the table. I had not really laughed, in 3 years, but that night the spell was broken. I want to share with you, from making choices, you then also develop some concepts about life as time goes on. And so the first concept I created in my head and then shared with 1 or 2 of the other widows as time went on was the idea of being almost happy. 5 years after Howard's death, which is when I first started writing this book, I began to feel happiness again, within limits. I guess you could say I was almost happy. The return of joy surprised me. but I knew it was real. At times, I'd catch myself singing or whistling around the house. But then something would remind me of Howard, and I'd fall back into sad reverie. I came to understand that being almost happy was a balancing act that would probably continue for a very long time. I decided that being almost happy might be good enough. It wasn't really so bad to dwell in a peaceful state where I was fully able to enjoy the moment or the day or the experience. So what if challenges loomed on the horizon? That is part of moving through the world, something I am very proud of being able to do. And I wanted to share with you one other main concept, which is that some people no longer fit. At some point, this is a quote from someone named Sandy Lynn, at some point you have to realize that some people can stay in your heart, but not in your life. This may be hard to fathom when you have just experienced a loss, but you may not need all the friends you can get. What I'm trying to say is that your life has changed profoundly, and there may be some perfectly lovely or not so lovely people in it who no longer fit. It's not their fault, it's not yours. As your needs change, as you change, there will be some collateral loss. The first people to let go of are those who are negative by their very nature. When you had a partner, perhaps this negativity didn't affect you so much. Perhaps you didn't even notice it. We tend to be more tolerant of our friends' quirks when we have a partner to lean on. But after a loss as profound as a spouse's death, we are already fighting against the clouds that surround us. The last thing we need is someone bringing more bad weather into our lives. And one of the women I interviewed, whose name is Nettie, she used the phrase, and I so wish I had thought of it, but I didn't. It's her phrase, and it's great, because we were talking about this. And she said, I said, Nettie also advocated for the elimination of negativity. I have no time for drama, she explained. I think of negative people as energy vampires. Is that not the best phrase? Energy vampires, who can suck you dry. And don't get me started on trying to fix them. That just is impossible. Sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and get yourself some new friends who provide what you need, some measure of peace. And what I'd like to do is end with this paragraph, which really is about widowhood itself. While widowhood isn't one experience, there are many things about it that do seem constant. I have shared with you many of the fears, concerns, problems, and situations I have faced along my own path, and have gone on to interview others about the same matters. Should I stay in my marital home? Will I ever feel like seeking out a new partner? Why don't people understand that I don't want to join the party? And maybe I never will. Although the answers to these questions are as unique as the women with whom I spoke, I've discovered that we in the Widows Club feel the same way about a lot of things, and that in itself is extremely comforting. I'm not alone in my experience. I'm not the first to feel these feelings, and neither are you. So that's what I'm going to conclude with. And yes, I appreciate the fact that you're here and sharing this journey with me. I greatly appreciate it. I also want you to know that if this will help someone you know, and we're approaching holiday time, sometimes what happens is you go to a function or a dinner and you realize somebody's not right. They've experienced this. Feel free. It's in the library, books on Amazon. I just want you to know that this was meant with a mission. My mission is to help other widows. Hello.
Okay. Are you dancing or listening to music? I know you're not wearing black.
Right.
Because I see you.
Well, actually, in responding to you, the dancing, no, not so much, no. Music, though, much better. I do listen to music, even the ones that evoke sadness. Um, the wearing of black is actually a funny experience because I had three women who came to my house to do the closets. And so when they did come to help me take out Howard's clothes, I said, leave the black. And they took all the other clothes. I have an upstairs, and they put them upstairs. And clothes stayed then. And a year later, the three women came back. One was flying from New York, one was coming from Lauderdale, and two were from here. And so we had four come, and they put all the clothes back in. And actually, another friend came and brought us dinner. We all had dinner together. But the closet was a big deal. But I did wear black. So yes, thank you for asking. Yeah, I appreciate it.
I had a question. I wanted to.
Sir?
You answered my question as you read, and it was about if the actual writing of the book helped you, because you said it's mostly to help others. Did the writing help you in any way?
That's a great question because people ask me, did the writing, as you just said, help me? And was it a catharsis for you? People ask me that question so often. It's a wonderful question because I never thought about it. No, not in the least. Now, I am writing a second book, and I will say, because that book is about marriage. And in that book, I talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know, just because you have a happily ever after doesn't mean it went like that. So in that book, I speak about marriage. And in that book, in this second book, I'm about halfway or a little more through, in that book, it is really something to go back to when you started. So this book is about a period of time, which continues forever. But that book, because it goes back to being 16 and 17, and then getting to be 66, married, that book is proving to be much more gut-wrenching. And I guess because I made this about somebody else. Because I sort of have, and I'll tell you what it is. It's in those of you who have the book, it's in the back. And it's sort of like a secret that I didn't share with anybody, but then I put it in the book, so I guess. And it says, and this is exactly what happened. About 3 weeks before Howard died, he turned to me using his elbow to prop himself up and put his hand under his chin so he could move anymore. And he looked at me and he said, "Please do not forget me." And I looked at him and replied, because I try to make things humorous if I can, in my usual humorous and loving way, "Are you insane? That could never happen." Now, of course, as with all of you, no one who reads this book will forget him either. Because there is a great quote, I think it's Emily Dickinson, but it says something to the effect of, "Person really isn't gone till the last person says their name." So this book has to go a lot of places.
Yeah, I know from going out to eat with you and all that. And of course, I didn't know you before or when you were married or whatever. But do you find it, or did you find it hard to go to some of his favorite restaurants or your favorite restaurants together that you no longer want to eat? And I never thought of that when we picked places to ask you, is this one?
Well, since there's somebody sitting in this group who really understands, that's a fabulous question, Diane, a fabulous question. And what happened was I had two friends, because, and I'm happy to say this, I am the only one, now I know people die every day at different ages and horrifically. So it's not that I'm not aware, but I am the only one of my friends, and I have friends all over the world. I am the only one who became a widow. So I had no role models. So that's why I made things up, and no music, no dancing, black. And what happened was I had two friends who called me up also about 3 months after Howard died. One said, "Let's do yoga," which is We had to take the class twice. The first class, like we took remedial yoga, basically. But in any case, she said, let's go once a week. And then there's somebody here who said, I'm going to leave my husband one night a week, and we are going to dinner. And I said, I can't, exactly what you're asking. I can't go into a restaurant that I used to go into. It's 3 months. It took me 3 weeks to walk to the mailbox, So what this person did was this person found restaurants that weren't like in my immediate area that I had never been to. So I could go to a restaurant, and we did it every Thursday night. And as a matter of fact, minus COVID, we still do it. I'm very fortunate because the people who take very good care of me, and that's how I look at it. I feel safe with those, and they take good care of me. And everyone who comes into my life proves to be extraordinary. Extraordinary, which means extraordinary. And so it took me a long time to do that, but this person made it so comfortable that after a while she said, don't you think we should try some? I said, yeah. It's not. But it's a process. It's a process. And fortunately, I met these 13 other women, and each one was obviously quite different. I mean, if you read this, you said, they're all the groups I told you about. They're African Americans, they're Jamaicans, they're from Middle America. I remember when someone asked me about if I had anybody from Middle America. I said, well, okay, so I have this woman from Middle America. So it's an unusual experience, but there was some commonalities. 11 out of the 13 I interviewed, 11, and I wasn't doing any research, which for me is not easy, but I wasn't doing any research. I just was, noting it. 11 out of the 13 stayed in their homes, and the 2 who didn't, it was an economic reason. When it's an economic reason, that takes priority. Does that answer your question?
And I guess my last question, from a librarian's point of view, recommendation, obviously it's for widows. I think it's also for like recent widows.
No, I'm just telling, only because people come to me and they say, sometimes a recent widow is not ready for this. Sometimes they are ready for it. Because I had one friend who came to one of my readings at Books and Books, and she said, I went to my neighbor who's a widow recent, and she said, oh, I'm not ready for that. And then 6 months later, she was.
Because it is like a time-sensitive book. Even though I read it and I related with it, and I feel like anybody that experienced a loss can relate to it in that sense. But like my book is everyone is retired in it. They've been widows for over 15 years. Been there, done that.
Yeah.
So it depends on where you are in your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you said something I was going to respond to. When the last time I was speaking at a bookstore, 5 women came in, they came together, and it was also pouring rain. I didn't think anybody would be there, but 5 women came in, plus women I knew, and men. They came marching in, and they said, we're a grief group. And I said, well, I really don't deal with grief in this specifically, although I understand that we're all grieving, but I really discuss moving forward. And the woman said, yes, but when you're a grief group, you have people who are not just widows. They lost parents, mothers, fathers, they lost children, so, right. People love their pets. They do quite a bit more for their pets frequently. So, and I appreciate that. Coming from a New York apartment, I never had a pet, so, lucky we had a room. So it's very interesting, though, the way that people look at this. And I made it, and then I had 2 men who called me. And one was a widower, and he said, I read the book because it's good for me. And the other man, of all things, I was in Atlanta with my daughter, and she was in Atlanta, and we were sitting, and my phone rings, and it's my dentist's office. And I said, it's my dentist. Did I miss an appointment? How could I do that? And sure enough, his name is Juan Salvat, and Juan called me, and it's him. And I said, Juan, is everything okay? Because he goes, I want to tell you, I read your book. I said, well, I didn't even know you had my book. He said, I read your book. Now, Juan is about maybe 50. I'm very bad with age. I can't tell how old anybody is. And he said, and I want you to know all the things that Howard did for you, I am doing for my wife now. He said, that way she'll know how to do this, because I spent time in the book. You see, I didn't know anything except what I was in charge of. But, so,
Give them that blueprint.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. He used it as a blueprint. And he said, we're going to Miami Beach or something for the weekend, and I'm going to sit with her, and I'm sitting with the book. He read the book, and I'm going to teach her these things. So you never know what leads somebody to anything. It's an interesting experience. I wish I had had the same experience in this book that I'm having in the second book, because it really does take you through life and puts things in perspective.
Thank you once again.
Sir.
That colleague with whom you had dinner with,
Yes.
is that one of those people that you had to let go out of your life?
Never. I spoke to him this morning. I never let go of people who were kind to me. As a matter of fact, it's an interesting thing, and I don't know if I should say it or not, but I will. I called, once I finished the book, and I sent the other 13 the book. I wanted them to have it and appreciated them. Every 3 months, I sat down with a list, and I took 1 week, and I said, I'm calling everybody, just so that they don't think I met with them, I wrote about them in a book, and then bye-bye. So I spent several years, about every 3 months, taking that week and call, because sometimes you call somebody, they're out, or it's a time difference. You got to call them at night or in the middle of the night. I did that for several years. And then I noticed after about 3 years, no, maybe 2 years of doing that, because of course I did them successively. So some had been longer with whom I was done. And I noticed that sometimes one didn't call me back. And then sometimes one said, oh, I'm really busy and this. And then I said, oh, and one finally said to me, matter of fact, she was the woman from Middle America. She said, you know, Arlene, she said, when I talk to you, you know I've remarried. I said, yes. She says, and it takes me back to my whole life with my first husband, and I don't ever want to go back there. So I think that things have a way of working. So I did try to communicate with them, because I'm so appreciative of people. And by the way, that's a word that all 13 widows, every one of them said to me, you wake up and you don't know why, and maybe some of you are religious or some of you have spiritual thoughts about this, but every single one of these women and myself, you wake up grateful. At the worst possible time, you just, within a week or 3 weeks, you just wake up grateful. You're grateful for everything. I don't know why, but you are. Just the way it is. You just have no concept of how this is going to work out. Thank you for asking.
I just thought of something while you were talking.
Uh-oh.
Of all these 13,
Yes.
and maybe more that you didn't put in a book or whatever.
Oh, no, I stopped at 13.
Okay.
13 having 4 interviews or
Did
52
anyone,
interviews.
or maybe they wouldn't say it, and they were widows. Were any of them ever sharing with you that they were in, their marriage was not a good marriage, and they were unhappy, and then they were feeling different emotions when their spouse has died?
So let me get this right. You want to know if
Did any of them share with you that they had not been happy in their marriage before their husband or wife died?
2 of them referred to it, but not as an interview. They were sharing. However, The process of being a widow was the same.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
The-
If
their
they
pro-
had different feelings because they were so unhappy in their marriage.
No.
or-
No, I understand what you're saying, and two of them expressed the fact that they didn't have a great marriage,
Right.
and probably also, and I don't know this is a fact, but I've been a behaviorist for a very long time, so I'm not one who looks into the depth of your psyche, but I do look at your behavior. And I think what happens is when you move into this role, everything changes anyway. It's an immediate change. It's when people talk to me because they're divorced, I say, you can't talk to me about being divorced because I wasn't divorced and I have no right to speak about divorce. Widowhood, whatever you want to know, I'm right there. But what was interesting, out of the 13, about 5 or 6 had new relationships. They had new relationships, but they were friends for almost 5 years. And then it transitioned. So it's interesting. It was a great experience because I was able to thank people who were so kind and so helpful to me. And at the same time, I was able to learn from them. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.